third episode of The Bad Batch was definitely not quite what I expected heading into my first viewing, and I honestly think that is a very good thing. So far this series has really thrown me off in terms of what I think is going to happen and the twists and turns that occur throughout the show, and yet again my expectations have been completely turned upside down only 3 episodes into the series. This episode showed a pretty dark side to the show that we hadn't quite seen yet. Sure, episode 1 had its darker moments considering it did start off with a scene from Order 66, which is always going to be a pretty dark scene no matter which way you look at it, but episode 3 took that and made it look like a literal children's TV show. That does often seem to be a common theme throughout discussions surrounding these animated shows such as the Clone Wars, Rebels and now the Bad Batch. However, episode 3 clearly showed us one thing: these shows are not made just for kids. I hear that so much whenever I'm in a discussion about these shows where people tend to write them off and just not even bother watching because they're made for kids or they're too childish or they're not dark enough or suitable enough for adults to enjoy, and honestly I could not disagree more with that. I definitely see the initial thought process there, as more often than not animated shows or cartoons are generally made with kids as the target audience, and so it makes sense why initially people jump to that conclusion if maybe they haven't seen the episodes yet or something, but it's episodes like this one that clearly show that these series are much more mature than people give them credit for. Towards the end of episode 3, Crosshair and his new squadron of elite soldiers were tasked with taking out Saw Gerrera on Onderon, as Tarkin wanted to see whether regular human soldiers could complete the task that the Bad Batch essentially failed to do, and boy did they pass his test with flying colours. When they arrived on Onderon, they quickly took out many of the troopers in the settlement, but then eventually found out that Saw wasn't actually there, at which point they were left with a bunch of civilians who had survived the attack. Crosshair questions one of them who doesn't tell him anything, and without even thinking, he instantly killed a civilian with absolutely no sense of regret whatsoever, which even to the rest of his squad doesn't seem to sit too well. One of the other members turns to the rest of the group saying that they're not executioners and that they didn't sign up for this, essentially saying that they tried to complete the mission of taking out Saw, but since he's not there, their job was done and that they should just return to Tarkin. Crosshair did not take that very well and ended up shooting his squad member once again without showing any signs of remorse, and then instantly ordered the rest of his squad to execute the civilians right then and there, even though those civilians are completely innocent in all of this. That right there is honestly up there with some of the darkest moments in all of Star Wars so far. There's definitely been a few dark moments in Star Wars, such as the Order 66 scenes, Anakin killing the younglings in Revenge of the Sith, the Alderaan scene in A New Hope, or even some of the moments in the Vader comics. But this moment right here was definitely up there with the rest of them, and it just proves that these shows like The Bad Batch are not made for little kids who are too young for violence. Somehow the show so far has managed to really fit in a heap of different feelings, as like I mentioned, that whole section was pretty dark, but yet the end of the episode is honestly adorable when Wrecker shows Omega her new bunk. That part hit me right in the feels and was essentially the complete opposite of the Crosshair scene that I was talking about. So I think the team have done a really good job of balancing it out and still having those heartwarming, more kid-friendly sections, while also adding some more dark and sort of villainous sequences as well, which seems to be setting up the story quite a bit. I'm likely going to be making a video on Crosshair in the coming week, but his character arc so far seems really deep, and it does seem like he feels quite conflicted at times, yet much the same as Anakin when he started to turn, his conflicting thoughts aren't really getting in the way of him doing some pretty terrible things. Now at the end of the episode we see him sitting on his bed after coming home to Kamino, and as the rest of his squad head on over to their beds in replacement of his old Clone Force 99 brothers, you can clearly see that he's quite conflicted about what he's just done in their last mission, and overall probably just the last few weeks as a whole, as he's obviously thinking about his brothers during that moment and probably feeling conflicted about whether he should have stayed with them or whether, like he keeps saying, good soldiers simply follow orders. I'm definitely very curious to see where his character arc goes throughout the rest of the season. That little moment of reflection at the end makes me think that maybe he will end up turning to the light again, but then the way that he acted during that mission showed that he just did not care about any sort of moral code, and that he's simply there to do what Tarkin tells him to do without questioning it at all, so I'm very interested to see what ends up happening. Overall though, I think this episode truly did prove that these animated Star Wars shows are not made for children, and that doesn't mean that kids can't watch it, obviously. I think anyone of any age can watch the show, but to say that these shows are just childish and not of, high quality and stuff like that has clearly been proven once again wrong, just in this episode alone. Now, quickly before I head off, I just wanted to let you guys know that I've recently set up a Patreon account and moved my channel memberships over there rather than having them here on YouTube. Patreon is a platform that just kind of allows me to have a little bit more freedom on YouTube with the crazy support from you guys, as I don't have to worry so much about making making, you know, the more clickbaity, dragged out videos that are going to get a lot of views. Rather, I can just sort of make the content that I think people are going to enjoy, and probably that I enjoy making more myself as well. And yeah, it just means that I'm not completely reliant on YouTube for my income, as they always say not to keep all your eggs in one basket, and after the channel was hacked a few months back, that has been made pretty apparent to me. In return for your support on Patreon, you guys can receive a bunch of awesome rewards each month depending on the level of support. Anything from private Discord channels with me and the rest of the patrons, and thank yous at the end of the video like what you can see on screen, to some more exciting stuff like full-length reactions to every single new episode of The Bad Batch, behind the scenes videos every month, and even free merch as well. So if any of that interests you guys, then feel free to check out the Patreon page. There'll be a link down in the description, and your support would help me out a ton in regards to keeping up with the regular weekly content here on YouTube. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
Crush them! Make them suffer!